Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's get started with our top story, which is from the United States. Has Joe Biden delivered the most important speech of his life? The US president came out firing on all cylinders today as he delivered his last State of the Union address before the presidential election. Described by most observers as fiery, Biden's speech addressed a whole host of issues that are likely to dominate the November election, from immigration and abortion rights to the economy and the war in Gaza. And his fiercest remarks were targeted at his Republican challenger, Donald Trump. Describing Trump as dangerous in a dramatic start to the speech, Biden said freedom and democracy were under assault in the United States, and he wanted to wake up the Congress and alert the American people to the danger. The reference was to the 6th January 2021 attack on Capitol Hill, which Biden squarely blames Trump for. Accusing Trump of bowing down to Vladimir Putin, Biden also issued a stern warning to the Russian president on the issue of Ukraine. He thundered, "We will not walk away, we will not bow down." The reference was to Trump's comments inviting Putin to invade other NATO nations if they did not spend more on defense. Interestingly, Biden launched a scathing attack on Trump without naming him. He referred to him as his predecessor 13 times during the address. The speech was possibly the Democratic president's biggest stage to reach voters who are still weighing whether to vote for him, choose Trump, or sit out the election altogether. With the stakes being incredibly high, Biden was feisty and confrontational, as he sought to draw the battle lines. "My predecessor failed the most basic duty any president owes the American people, the duty to care. That is unforgivable," Biden said in reference to Trump's handling of the COVID pandemic. He slammed Trump for his recent comments, as we said, on Russia and NATO, and accused him of trying to bury the truth about the Capitol Hill riots. He also blamed Trump for the US Supreme Court's decision to overturn the Roe versus Wade ruling, which guaranteed abortion rights in the US, and for blocking bipartisan immigration reforms. Many say Biden had no choice but to appear strong, feisty, and ready for a fight. Remember, at 81, he is the oldest president in US history and has been haunted by repeated questions about his age, forgetfulness, gaffes, and mental acuity. His approval ratings are the lowest of any modern president seeking re-election. He is in a statistical dead heat with Donald Trump, with some polls suggesting Trump leads Biden by a few points. The US president addressed his age and while doing so took yet another swipe at his opponent. Remember, Trump at 77 is only a few years younger than him. Biden said, "I know it may not look like it, but I've been around for a while." After rattling off a series of positive changes that the country has seen over time, Biden said some other people my age see a different story, an American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution. On the issue of immigration, seen as an area of major vulnerability for him, Biden called for Republicans to support the bipartisan immigration legislation passed by the Senate and accused Trump of playing politics by opposing the bill for electoral gain. Looking to drive home the point that he had actually done well on the economic front, Biden said, "I inherited an economy that was on the brink, and now our economy is the envy of the world." He went on to call the US economic revival the greatest story never told. While figures on the American economy have been trending up for months now, the public perception of the economy has been much darker, especially with most Americans being unhappy about rising inflation. On the back foot, on his support to Israel's war in Gaza, Biden said his administration was working towards a ceasefire that would last at least 6 weeks, and he detailed a new plan for the US military to construct a temporary seaport on the Gaza coastline to allow humanitarian aid to enter the embattled enclave by ship. Biden also had some harsh words for Israel. calling the civilian casualties in Gaza heartbreaking and gut-wrenching. He said Israel had a fundamental responsibility to protect innocent lives. Biden also called for more military aid to Ukraine. With many Democrats expressing their nervousness and skepticism about Biden's re-election campaign in recent months, his supporters are hoping that with today's speech, Biden has exhibited that he is ready to take on Trump come November. Meanwhile, Trump, who had promised to react in real time to Biden's address on his Truth Social platform, said Biden is on the run from his record and lying like crazy to try and escape accountability for the horrific devastation he and his party have created. They continue the very policies that are causing this horror show. Yet another reference to Biden's immigration policies. The question we're asking on Global Lens tonight is this. With his fiery State of the Union address, has Biden succeeded in resetting the narrative ahead of the US presidential elections? Has he managed to convince at least some of his critics, the skeptical Democrats and the fence-sitters in the United States, that he is indeed ready and deserving of a second term in the White House?
Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas. The threat to democracy must be defended. My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. I will not do that. This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win. America cannot go back. I'm here tonight to show what I believe is the way forward, because I know how far we come. 4 years ago next week, before I came to office, the country was hit by the worst pandemic and the worst economic crisis in a century. Remember the fear, record losses. Remember the spikes in crime and the murder rate, raging virus that took more than 1 million American lives, of loved ones, millions left behind. A mental health crisis of isolation and loneliness. A president, my predecessor, failed the most basic presidential duty that he owes to American people, the duty to care. I think that's unforgivable. I came to office determined to get us through one of the toughest periods in the nation's history. We have. It doesn't make news in 1,000 cities and towns. The American people are writing the greatest comeback story never told. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that it needs to defend itself. That is all Ukraine is asking. They're not asking for American soldiers. In fact, there are no American soldiers at war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way. But now, assistance to Ukraine is being blocked by those who want to walk away from our world leadership. It wasn't long ago when a Republican president named Ronald Reagan thundered, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." That's a quote. A former president actually said that, bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable.
Joe Biden is on the run from his record and lying like crazy to try and escape accountability for the horrific devastation he and his party have created. All the while, they continue the very policies that are causing this horror show to go. We cannot take it any longer as a country. Joe Biden's sad excuse for a State of the Union address aside, here are the facts. When I left office, we gave Joe Biden the most secure border in U.S. history. We gave him remain in Mexico, very tough to get, but I got it. Safe third agreements, the asylum ban, Title 42, 571 miles of border wall, rapid deportations, and much more. We had the safest border in the history of our country. As soon as he got in, Crooked Joe and his radical left lunatics deliberately dismantled each and every one of those policies that were so good, that gave us this best border. What's happened now is a horror show. The country, our country, is being laughed at all over the world. Over the past 3 years, Biden has actively aided and abetted the importation of millions and millions of illegal alien migrants and resettled them into your communities. At any time during the past 3 years, Crooked Joe Biden, and he is crooked as you can be and the most incompetent president we've ever had, could have called off the invasion. But to this day, he is keeping the hordes of illegal migrants and illegal aliens pouring into the country. By the time his term is up, we can have close to 20 million people in our country.
All right. So Trump's predictable attack there on President Biden, but has the current president sprung a surprise with his State of the Union address? What impact is it likely to have on his presidential campaign and the contest itself? Let's put this question to our guests. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, Ambassador S.R. Tayal, former Indian diplomat, Dr. Umu Salma Bawa, professor at the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Sanjeev Srivastava, political and foreign affairs commentator. Later on the show, we're also hoping to be joined by Manoj Joshi of the Observer Research Foundation. Ambassador Tayal, if I could start with you. The biggest question that we're asking on Global Lens tonight is simply this. Most observers believe that Biden may have given the most important speech of his life. The stakes couldn't be higher. He is on the back foot on many issues. But given his feistiness, that we saw on display, the attacks on Trump, and a series of other statements that he made addressing almost every major issue that is likely to dominate the upcoming presidential contest. The question is, do you believe that Joe Biden has managed to perhaps soothe the nerves of those Democrats who've all along been worried about his age, the gaffes he's made in public multiple times, those who question his mental acuity? And do you believe he may have managed to win over some of the fence sitters who could play a crucial role in the election come November?
First, it is surprising that the Democratic Party could not throw up a candidate who was younger and could have had more connection with the masses. But whatever polls have been there in United States till now, when the pollsters ask the people who will vote for Biden that why are they voting for Biden, they say it is an anti-Trump vote. A majority of voters who will vote for Biden when asked further, they say they are voting for Biden because they do not want Trump to come back. Whereas on the other side, when pollsters ask the voters of potential voters of Trump that why are you voting for Trump, they like Trump. So that is a pro-Trump vote first and anti-Biden vote later. So in this speech, President Biden is trying to expand this constituency of American voters who are anti-Trump and who realize that he will be a very big danger for the democracy of United States. Unfortunately, people have short memories, and people of America also have forgotten what happened on 6th of January 2021, and even before that. If you really see how President Trump, who was president at the time, behaved in the whole process, saying that the election has been stolen. He first tried to pressurize the vote counters in Georgia and Arizona to delay the counting, not count postal ballots. His team pressurized the Secretary of State who is responsible for counting. Then he asked his Department of Justice to declare election as a stolen election, a fraud election. And his own appointee Attorney General said no. Then the whole process in the United States is unfortunately very long. Election was held on 4 November 2020. Results were practically known 2-3 days later. But the representatives of states met on 6th of January, and actually President Biden became president on 20th of January. In that whole process, again, President Trump was trying to upset the counting and certification of the presidential election on 6th of January 2021 when he pressurized Vice President Pence not to declare the result. And this is all well recorded. And then when Vice President Pence, and full credit to him that he was appointee of President Trump.
But he stood up to Trump. Absolutely.
He did not stand for Trump. He withstood the pressure and went by the Constitution. And the biggest thing, if you recall, on 13 January 2021, when President Trump was still president, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 8 of them, issued a memo to all service members that US military, quote, will obey lawful orders from civilian leadership, unquote.
Yeah.
And protect and defend the Constitution of United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So they were perhaps expecting or seeing some kind of a illegal, unlawful order from President Trump, because he was still president. He was still commander of the forces till 20th of January 2021, till Biden was sworn in.
Right.
So they cautioned there. So that means there was so much of nervousness among the elite, and this attack was there on 6th of January 2021 on the Capitol. So President Trump is inherently non-democratic. He tried to overrule the election results in every possible manner. But full credit goes to the American institutions, whether it is Vice President, his own appointee, Attorney General, his own appointee, Chiefs of Staff, his own appointee. They stuck to the Constitution of the United States and did not bow to these illegal wishes.
And saved American democracy. I couldn't agree more with you, sir, because what happened on the 6th of January 2021 was not only unprecedented, but perhaps the biggest threat ever mounted to American democracy itself. Those scenes that we witnessed on Capitol Hill were shocking, to say the least. And that is exactly what Biden is hoping to focus on going into this election. Let me now take this to Dr. Bawa. Dr. Bawa, Ambassador Tayal makes a very important and interesting point. He says that a lot of polls suggest that most of those who've made up their minds about supporting Biden on the 5th of November want to do so because the very idea of a second Trump presidency is anathema to them. It's an absolute nightmare for them. So it may not be a pro-Biden vote. It is primarily an anti-Biden vote, and that is the constituency that President Biden is hoping to expand going into this election. Therefore, little surprise that he came out firing on all cylinders and without naming him even once, launched the most scathing attack till date on Donald Trump. And perhaps the most significant remark that he made while making that attack was this, when he said freedom and democracy in the United States are under assault, and he said he wanted to wake up the Congress and alert the American people to that danger. Of course, most of the references were to 6th of January. My question to you, Dr. Pava, is this: do you believe that this pitch will be strong and powerful enough to see President Biden through on the 5th of November? We all know that this allegation, however true it may be, makes no difference to Trump's hardcore support base. But then there are the fence-sitters. There are also Republicans who've expressed grave concern over what happened on the 6th of January. Do you believe this pitch or narrative alone will be enough to take President Biden home on the 5th of November?
So good evening and thank you so much. Let me begin by saying that, politics is a lot about substance, but politics is also a lot about perception. And if you were to view it from the lens of perception, then the State of the Union address by President Biden definitely was in that direction of changing the perception, reaching out to a large cross-section of people, not only within his own party, those who are still, as you say, fence-sitters, but also a much larger pitch aimed at, the American public in general, to reach out and make them understand that your political choice in the days ahead, there are going to be a number of, points in this journey up to when the actual calendar for American elections will get set by November. And in that way, he was kind of reaching out to a much larger audience, I believe, to kind of also make them recognize, as you say, the two key words is about democracy and freedom at home. And in that extent, I would say that you've seen one of the most powerful speeches that Biden has given. He would obviously have to maintain that tempo because that's, going into the State of Union address, one did not expect that this would have to be a different kind of a State of Union address. Rather, it became more about the pitch from this point onwards within the Congress, not only about what is happening within the United States, but remember, the rest of the world also tuned in to watch. So it becomes a foreign policy agenda for those around the world. But in terms of domestic politics, I think it was the big stake ticket yesterday evening as President Joe Biden addressed, the country, the people, and the various cross-section in terms of making them realize, first, he is a leader to reckon with. I think that was very important. Second, he knows what he's talking about. He's coming with a sound mind, and he has a clear idea and vision where he wants to take the country, often not naming and still naming repeatedly the misdemeanors of the past, as he called his predecessor. Third, clearly putting down that, where people should take their faith in terms of voting. The journey to November is still 8 months away. And between that, there will be many high and low points in which voters, those who are still sitting on the fence, will keep on moving across this. And so it's an important point to start with a position of strength because the president at this point did not have very high ratings. And therefore, everybody's eyes was on this State of Union address in terms of what is the magic he's going to create? What is that extra bit he's going to pull out in the State of the Union address to convince the voters, convince the political analysts, remember, who are going to be writing up on this, and the audience outside as to why he is the right choice, going ahead. Because the minute the president said that he's willing to go in for a second round, it basically within the Democratic Party has meant that nobody else will put in a bid whereas that was not the case for the Republican Party, right? So you see a different kind of contestation both within the parties in terms of who's the best candidate fit going ahead to take on for the next presidential elections.
Certainly, that's very interesting. Of course, we know that Biden is haunted by issues pertaining to his age. Many have questioned his mental acuity. And of course, there have been repeated questions about whether the Democratic Party could consider replacing him with another candidate. Therefore, you know, as I said earlier, many said he had no choice but to, come out all guns blazing, and he seems to have done that quite successfully. Let me take this to Sanjeev Srivastav. Mr. Srivastav, Dr. Bava is making the point that President Biden most certainly made a very powerful speech. He was trying to send out a message, not just to his critics and opponents, but also to those in the Democratic Party who may have by and large supported him over the last 3.5 years, but are now skeptical about, him coming back to the White House for a second term. And, what is also clear is that on the one hand, you have Trump, who goes on and on and on about immigration. He's made it abundantly clear that that is going to be the primary plank on which he's going to contest this election because, well, he's known to indulge in a lot of fear-mongering. It may have worked for him in 2016. I'm sure he's hoping it'll work for him again in 2024. And to be honest, President Biden's immigration policies have been rather unpopular. On the other hand, Biden seems to have made it abundantly clear that, while you can talk about the economy, you can talk about abortion rights, you can talk about a whole host of other issues, but he has decided that his primary poll plank is going to be democracy, that this is a fight for the very, preservation of American democracy. The question now is, number one, as Dr. Bava asks, can Biden keep up the tempo for 8 long months? And two, which of the two competing narratives is likely to sell better?
Well, Neha, I think first of all, what President Biden has done last evening was certainly a very powerful speech he delivered. And he, with this speech, as Professor Bava very rightly mentioned, that he not only addressed his court support base, but also he tried to, reach out to the U.S. Domestic constituency and the undecided voters in particular, the swing states, as you know, that they play the most important role in deciding the results of the U.S. presidential elections every time. And with this kind of a speech, he certainly tried to reach them out. And as I was saying to you in the last discussion we had, that it is essentially going to be a contest between the more rightist thinking and approach, conservative approach, more nationalistic approach versus the liberal approach. But in this case, when you have an opponent like Donald Trump, there are certain few more things which should be looked into, and that is that former President Trump has been very unconventional, unpredictable, and he never held any office before becoming the President of the United States of America in 2016, and he is very transactional. He does all sorts of every time a cost-benefit analysis, whether he is approaching his domestic policies or the foreign affairs, and that makes him a very unconventional president. And with various domestic politics, he became like a disruptor, and you don't know what kind of approach he is coming out with at a time when the world is facing so much of strategic uncertainty, economic uncertainty, and certainly the issue of democracy, the kind of approach he showed on January 6th, and after that the events followed. This raises a lot of questions and concern, and I'm sure that there must be a large number of people in the United States of America. They must be very concerned that if Trump comes back again, then what kind of policies he is going to be following with regard to America's democracy, with regard to America's several, burning issues which Americans are facing, whether immigration rights or abortion rights, or the gun control laws, or the economy, or America's approach towards climate change. And in the foreign affairs, if you go to, it was President Donald Trump who came out from the Paris climate deal. It was President Donald Trump who came out from the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and he came out of the Iranian nuclear deal. So I think this kind of approach makes former President Donald Trump very unconventional, unpredictable, which many people in the United States of America may not like to have that kind of an experience. But having said that, let me say here that there are certain number of people in the United States of America which are in favor of having more America first approach. What President Trump advocated in 2016, and he was always talking about the forgotten people and the people who are on the sidelines, who are on the periphery, which the liberals are not giving much attention to. So I think at this point of time also, what I assess is that there are a large number of such people are still there in the United States of America, those who want to have more self-centric, more conservative, more nationalistic approach, and that's what makes President Donald Trump more popular, despite facing all sorts of court cases and all sorts of problems, legal hurdles he's facing. His popularity is still very much there, and it is not because of his anything more attractive in his personality, but it is because of the unconventional America first self-centric approach what he follows, that makes him very attractive. So as I said, that essentially it is going to be a contest between the more conservative nationalistic approach versus the liberal approach, and that is what but ultimately the swing states, the undecided voters, wherever they will vote for, that will decide the fate of this election.
Okay, so the undecided voters are going to decide the fate of this election. It could very well boil down to the swing states. I need to take a quick break here on Global Lens, but we'll continue this conversation on the other side. Stay with us.
It's probably the best kept secret in India.
Family-owned business, which has been extremely clinical in their approach. They have not hesitated ever to kill their darlings.
Typical to a South Indian business empire, I think they've shunned the limelight almost deliberately.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface, but not the living people?
Start with the end in mind. You need to know where you want to reach. Every morning that we wake up, we are exercising our choice. The destiny is decided. The results are known that I'm going to win. Life of a goalkeeper is something which has always intrigued me. When you come into a stadium, this is the highest level of pressure. When I set out to do something, I decide in my mind that failure is not an option.
What you feel very strongly about, those are the stories to tell.
I have a mind which is absolutely restless. Mind and body are entangled sensations. That brings me back to golf. It's an amazing game.
This is not a perfect game. You only learn from them.
If you have a formula to a success, then you can replicate it.
I feel this is my first step. I'm starting now.
Winner is first born in the mind. I think, therefore I am. We are all about our mind.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
I try and convert almost everything in a kind of a mathematical formula.
You should always stretch more than you can reach.
Listening is very important.
Because if you don't listen, how would you know what the problem is?
Everybody who's working in and around me, their personal well-being is also a responsibility that I carry.
Great leaders have shared vision.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing President Joe Biden's powerful State of the Union address with which he has undoubtedly kicked off his presidential campaign for 2024. We also have Manoj Joshi, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, joining us on Global Lens at this point. Mr. Joshi, if I could come to you. Most analysts believe that this speech was powerful. It packed a punch. Biden came out firing on all cylinders. Not only was his attack on Trump scathing, but the message he was trying to send out is that even at the age of 81, he is not only fit for office, but he is raring to go and the right man for the job. What's also clear is that Donald Trump has decided that immigration will be his primary pole plank, on which many believe Biden is on the back foot. And President Biden has made it abundantly clear that for him it is all about democracy. As he said in that speech today, that democracy itself is under assault. He's trying to wake up the American people. And the message essentially is that American democracy needs to be saved from Donald Trump. So my question to you is, which of the two narratives do you believe is likely to prove to be more powerful? Will this speech be enough to carry Biden through this election? And also, with today's speech, do you believe President Biden may have succeeded in wooing some of the fence sitters?
Well, one thing is very clear, that given the concerns about Biden's age, his delivery was as important as the substance of the speech. And we can see after that he has been able to bring out the issue. He's been able to, put down the questions about energy. It is an extremely energetic speech. And I think no one has doubts there that Biden has the energy to go forward. So I think it's an extremely good beginning for his election campaign. When it comes to issues, I think those are also very obvious. But Biden pointed out that he was willing to offer a very strong legislation on immigration, but it's the Republicans who turned it down. So I'm saying that, here, this is something, immigration is a very sensitive issue. All Americans, most of the Americans are immigrants, but they don't acknowledge it. But even the immigrants currently, the people who they call up, undocumented, illegal, or whatever it is, they are extremely important for the American agro industry, meaning all the agricultural work, picking up fruits, cultivating crops, etc., is done by these so-called illegals. And there is a divide there between, the high-tech kind of industry and the agro industry. And here I need to point out that most people don't realize that America is as much of an agro-industrial power as it's an tech power. And so the terrible work that has to be done in the farms and the fields, etc., is done by these so-called illegals. So it's all right for some people to say, no, we don't want these guys, then, etc. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people, there is a vested interest in the US for these people, for, as I said, the so-called illegals. And the bottom line, of course, is that America is a land of immigrants.
It is a country of immigrants, there is no doubt about that. But Donald Trump has decided that he will continue to raise the specter of illegal immigration to keep Biden on the back foot. Therefore, the question is Biden's counter narrative about democracy being under threat strong enough? Let me go back to Ambassador Tayal. Ambassador Tayal, let's look at some of the points or arguments that Biden made in his speech today. On the issue of immigration, as has been pointed out by Mr. Joshi, he says, well, we try to bring a very strong legislation on immigration. It is the Republicans who blocked it. It is Trump who decided to play politics with it for electoral gain. On the issue of the economy, he says, I inherited an economy that was on the brink. Now our economy is the envy of the world. And the US economic revival is the greatest comeback story never told. That's because the Americans are not willing to give any credit to Joe Biden for the fact that the American economy is doing far better than expected, because inflation continues to be a matter of concern. And on the point of age, it's very interesting the way he addressed it. That was quite a swipe he took at Donald Trump when he said, you know, some people my age see a different American story. The point he was making is, if I'm 81, you're 77. You're not exactly, a young man. So do you believe that he has managed to put a lot of those concerns, or at least some of those concerns, to rest, or at least has put up a strong enough defense?
On immigrants, he is on a weak wicket. He has Biden and the entire Democratic Party is very soft on immigration and how to stop them, deport them, etc. And I would say that for any party in a two-horse race, to pander to minority wishes cannot win them elections. They have to be in tune with the majority perception. And majority perception in US is that Democrats are soft on immigration. And the kind of images and pictures we see, that hundreds of thousands of potential immigrants are lined up in Mexico and they are coming, and no country and no person can accept that. Of course, they are all immigrants, but they are old immigrants and new immigrants, and there may be an element of racism also there. Trump's wife, itself, she came from Serbia or somewhere. So there are all kinds of issues, but President Biden has to take some strong action to remove this perception that he is soft on this unchecked immigration. And he has not yet succeeded. He has tried to put the blame on the Republicans, and it is a fact that they have blocked this bill, but he has to take some action. As we have discussed on your show, it could be an executive order or something.
Okay.
Now, second, on economy, yes, the economy is growing very well and unemployment is declining, but inflation is there. Americans are not used to inflation. They were used to 1 or 2% inflation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you talk to your own relatives and friends who are in US, they will say that inflation is very, very high. And that hurts the middle America, the poor, not poor, but middle America, who are on 40, 50, 60,000 per year households. And that is the backbone of support to President Trump. And on age, whatever, I have great respect for Mr. Vladimir Joshi, but the swagger of the energy of Trump is miles ahead of this
Biden cannot match that. Okay, that's interesting. Biden cannot match Trump's energy, even if they are just a few years apart, while Biden tried his best to send out the message to Trump that you're no spring chicken yourself. Okay, I'm running out of time, Dr. Bava. I'll give you the last word very quickly. Now, if inflation and immigration are the areas of most vulnerability for President Biden, do you believe that he has enough time between now and November to course correct?
So I think, you've got the two eyes of immigration and inflation, and both are not addressed from the same point of view. Immigration, there was an attempt to get a bipartisan to get it through. And that has not happened, which means that this will get trumped up, and Trump will make it his main point of contestation that it is a danger to America and all the American values that one stands for. And he did a very good job, as he said in the clip you showed, of making America safe and secure. Now, inflation is something which can be still course corrected, I believe. And that with a growing economy and confidence, there is a possibility in the 8 months that the next economic indicators can give a greater sense of economic hope to the people. It's not the greater evil. Ultimately, what you have to deal with is the perception of the people. And both these issues of immigration and inflation affect different sections of America in very, very different ways. So I think the important point going ahead would be, how would the various constituencies of American domestic politics, which are concerned about immigration and inflation, what is the kind of messaging that they're going to get from both the candidates, from President Biden, and what is it, the counter narrative, which, former President Trump will put forward.
All right. Multiple issues that are going to come up in this election, but I think it would be pretty safe to say that immigration and democracy being on the ballot, as Biden puts it, are likely to dominate the presidential campaign of 2024. On that note, Ambassador Tayal, Dr. Bava, Manoj Joshi and Sanjeev Srivastav, thank you so much to all of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, let's now turn our attention to India's foreign policy. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar gave yet another hard-hitting and no-nonsense reply to a question, this time about the allegations of double standards levelled against India. During an event in Tokyo, Jaishankar was told that India has not criticised Russia over its ongoing war with Ukraine, and people think of it as India's double standards. To this, Jaishankar had a sharp reply. He said, and I quote, "We in India know better than almost any other country, because immediately after our independence we experienced aggression, we experienced an effort to change our boundaries, and even today parts of India are occupied by another country. But we did not see the world saying there is a great principle involved and therefore let's all go with India." I wish I had seen these great principles in play for the last 80 years. I have seen these principles cherry-picked when it suits people.
My position would be that the world is a complicated place, and there are many important principles and beliefs in the world. What happens sometimes in politics, in world politics, is countries pick one issue, one situation, one principle, and they highlight it because it suits them. But if one looks at the principle itself, I mean, we in India know better than almost any other country because immediately after our independence, we experienced aggression. We experienced an effort to change our boundaries, and even today parts of India are occupied by another country. But we did not see the world respond saying, oh, there's a great principle involved and therefore let us all go with India. So yes, today we are being told that there are principles involved. I wish I had seen that principle in play for the last 80 years. I've seen those principles cherry-picked when it suits people and not when it doesn't suit people. But I do think it's an important principle, because, I would say, injustice was done to us. I'm not advocating it should be done to everybody else. We are, we have been very clear. My Prime Minister has stood next to President Putin and has said that we do not believe that this is an era of war. We are today for resolving this conflict. We want to see the end to this conflict.
All right, let's now get you the latest on Indian nationals who are in fact trapped currently in Russia. The CBI's raids on agents and companies involved in trafficking Indians to Russia have revealed the nefarious ways in which youngsters were duped into fighting the country's wars against Ukraine. Some were sent on the pretext of being given jobs as delivery boys. Others were told they would be working as helpers for the Russian army, but were categorically assured that their duties would have nothing to do with the front lines. These young men were also told that since Russia needed manpower in the war effort, the country would issue a government official card to them, which would almost guarantee a permanent residency. In a press briefing today, the Ministry of External Affairs acknowledged this issue and said several Indian nationals have been duped into working with the Russian army. We once again appeal to Indian nationals to not be swayed by offers made by agents for support jobs with the Russian army. This is fraught with danger and risk to life.
Number of people, as I had told you in our last presser, that around 20 people had contacted us. We are trying to we are doing our best to locate them. We are in touch with the Russian authorities. We have pressed with them. Indians who've been caught in Russia. Several Indian nationals have been duped to work with the Russian army. We have strongly taken up the matter with the Russian government for early discharge of such Indian nationals. Strong action has been initiated against agents and unscrupulous elements who recruited them on false pretexts and promises. The CBI yesterday busted a major human trafficking network, conducting searches in several cities and collecting incriminating evidence. A case of human trafficking has been registered against several agents.
On to China now, where currently a parliament session is underway. Let's take a look at the key takeaways. China's top legislators have vowed to enact a slew of new laws to modernize China's system and capacity for national security, while safeguarding sovereign interests, a sign of what some analysts say is a heightened focus on perceived security threats by Beijing. The roughly 170-member National People's Congress Standing Committee, or NPCS's gathering at the annual meeting of Parliament in Beijing pledged to enact legislation including an emergency management law and atomic energy law. They also said they would revise laws on national defense education and cybersecurity this year. The annual legislative plan had an increased focus on national security in line with President Xi Jinping's growing focus on preventing internal and external threats in response to intensifying geopolitical competition. China's cybersecurity law, enacted in 2016, is a cornerstone of its big tech regulation. Beijing in the past 3 years has tightened regulation over how its companies store and transfer user data, citing national security concerns. Experts say the Chinese president has turned national security into a key paradigm that permeates all aspects of China's governance. Last month, China broadened its state secrets law to include work secrets in the scope of restricted sensitive information and enacted a controversial counter-espionage law last year that spooked foreign businesses. The separate Supreme People's Court work report also vowed to apply the concept of overall national security to its work this year. Experts say these decisions reflect the growing tensions between China and the United States. And finally, well, it's International Women's Day today, and on the occasion we have a special and a very interesting story for you. Ahead of International Women's Day, male office workers at a telecom firm in Tokyo were made to experience simulated menstrual pain to help them become more sympathetic towards their female colleagues. EXEO group workers winced at a company event as a Pyranoid device sent electric signals via pads placed below the navel to simulate the lower stomach muscle and induce a cramping sensation. After using this device, 26-year-old Masaya Shibasaki said, and I quote, "I couldn't move. It hurt to the point where I couldn't stand. I now understand that women have to work while fighting this pain every month. It's actually amazing how women can do that. I really respect them." The company says it wants to create an environment where its more than 90% male workforce can be more supportive of female peers, including when it comes to taking menstrual leave. Now, EXAO's public relations officer said, "We hope those who experienced simulated menstrual pain today go back to their workplace and speak about how they felt and spread their understanding." Now, companies in Japan are legally required to allow women to take menstrual leave. However, there is no requirement that their time off should be paid, and surveys show around half of women workers never actually avail of this leave. But certainly an important lesson there for the men working at this company in Tokyo. All right, on that note, here's wishing all the lovely women out there a very happy Women's Day. That's all the time we have on Global Lens tonight. Thanks so much for watching.
Film and entertainment is definitely one of the levers for any country to build its brand.
We are getting global. I feel that we're just on the takeoff.
More and more films are becoming language agnostic.
Content is a universal language.
There's one audience in the world.
Absolutely. End of the day, we all are like brothers who have mutual respect for each other from a different land.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
There's a new video around what deepfake can do.
We have seen a trailer of this a few days back.
Donors should not be only on the platform.
We'll have to wait and see how those play out.
Hindenburg's report cannot be taken as gospel of truth.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
We are trying a lot of experiments, innovations and ideas.
We came out with a new format in audio, which is audio series.
Listening for content-oriented company in India, which is a very unique proposition.
When we look at audio in general, we had music, which is like extremely old format, and then we had podcasts.
A natural extension for Pocket FM is to move from Hindi to regional content. I think I'd love to see their FY24 numbers, which they claim will be close to 1,000 crores. I think there are talks of them to raise another $80 to $100 million of funding.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
A defiant performance by Ten Hag's men. Now standing at 7 feet 4 inches, Satnam Singh is making his way into professional wrestling.
We are getting more good news for India.
The football is mother of all games. It is a team sport.
The leadership attitude is taking the ownership.
It's always a big responsibility to take decisions and the right decisions.
I always question the stereotypical.
And that's why you are in that position.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Here are the top 9 headlines today. On International Women's Day, the government has slashed prices of domestic gas cylinders by 100 rupees. Announcing the decision, Prime Minister Modi said it will significantly ease the financial burden on millions of households. Highlighting India's leadership among the Global South, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has said the 125 countries place their trust in India and that China skipped the 2 meetings convened by India last year to listen to their concerns. Mr. Jaishankar was addressing the Nikkei Forum on the India-Japan partnership in Tokyo. PM Modi has inaugurated projects worth around 18,000 crore in Assam. During his 2-day tour, the PM will be staying at the Kaziranga National Park. He will be the first Indian Prime Minister to spend the night at the park. Telugu Desam Party chief and former Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu is likely to return to the NDA. Naidu broke ties with the alliance 6 years ago. The speculation heightened after Naidu met Union Home Minister Amit Shah. In Odisha, the BJP and the BJD are inching closer to a reunion after 15 years. Lok Sabha polls and assembly elections are scheduled simultaneously in the state. President Draupadi Murmu has nominated author and philanthropist Sudha Murthy to the Rajya Sabha. Congratulating Murthy, Prime Minister Modi said her contribution to diverse fields has been immense and inspiring. The Maldivian Defence Forces will have operational authority over the helicopter given by India to the island nation and the civilian crew that will pilot it, announced a spokesperson. In his last State of the Union address before the November election, US President Joe Biden has emphasized on revitalizing ties with India. Biden also said the US wants competition with China but not conflict. Meanwhile, in West Asia, the US Central Command said it has conducted strikes against 4 mobile Houthi anti-ship cruise missile launchers and 1 Houthi unmanned aerial vehicle in the rebel-controlled areas of Yemen. Today is International Women's Day. There's a school of thought that thinks we must celebrate womanhood every day of the year. So what are we celebrating? Well, for starters, India has passed a legislation mandating reservation for women in parliament. But gender parity remains a distant dream, particularly in our boardrooms. Crimes against women are on the rise, and India ranks 128th out of 177 countries on women's inclusion, justice, and security. But we decided to celebrate a set of achievers who've blazed a trail in professions so far dominated by men. Now, before Women's Day goes out of fashion, I'm joined by cinematographer Priya Seth, Gunjan Taneja, Radhika Srivastav, and my 2 colleagues Nivriti Mohan and Lakshana Gulati, who've been tracking women achievers throughout their career here at News9 Plus. Ladies, welcome to the News9 Plus show. It's so good to be having you all here. This is a women's only show. I think I'm in a minority right here. But, I'm going to start by asking you, Priya,